Hey, Grand Ascension. How's everybody doing? It's me, baby girl Slaughter, aka Niecy Denise, back to do another reading. I just wanted to jump on here today and I want to deep dive into the last chapter of Rise of the Clones, Tesla and the Cabbage Patch Babies, Guy Anderson's second literary work. Uh, the last part that I needed to cover in this book was the contributor stories. Okay. If you remember before that, that's chapter 15. Before that, we were reading over the the homocleus, and we talked about how it was stated that certain people had the alchemical knowledge or the knowledge to make this admixture of this quote unquote Gollum type being, right? And so these beings were created periodically throughout the time, and it's been documented that there have been certain people, especially rabbis, that created these beings. Now, y'all remember that. So this last part that I want to talk to you guys about is the contributor stories, and then we're done with the book, right? Because you guys know we finished up Tesla and the Cabbage Patch Kids, and then we also I started reading, not all the stories, but certain chapters within his latest book, Conspiracy Theories from Agatha to Zombies, all right? So let's just get into the contributor stories. So it says, when I began researching this book, I had already explored the Cabbage Patch Babies and the orphan train movement in my first work. But this time I wanted to go beyond my own thoughts and observations. I set out to include the voices of other people who had uncovered far more striking anomalies in their families' histories that I had, as well as those from around the world who had been investigating the same topics. I was eager to hear their perspectives, not only on their subjects, but also on unrelated areas that intersected with our shared lines of inquiry. Together, these insights, I reached out to members of my Facebook group, which I am in his Facebook group, chime into that, and asked my friend and podcaster, Richard Vobes, to invite his audience to contribute as well. To my surprise, the response was overwhelming. Yeah. Dozens of people contacted me, far more than I could feature in full. Some generously shared their findings and personal stories for inclusion, while others preferred to speak privately, okay, without their experiences being published, something I fully understand and deeply respect. Not everyone is ready to make their most personal truths or lingering suspicions public. Now, I will, full stop, I will say this. I have read to you guys on multiple occasions about how Inky and Nimhergsad, along with the council, right, Enlil and others, created this or reconstructed this being. There was already a being here in this plane of existence, right, when they came, but they set out to create something else, and they titled it as though this being was going to be a helper or a worker, right? I wouldn't say an indentured servant, but a worker to assist them in pulling minerals out the land and taking precious metals and things and sending them off out of this dome, off plane of existence, to beyond the ice walls to another locale. People want to say outer space. My understanding is not outer space, okay, like you would think, like we've been taught. Like I said, I'm not here to convince anyone anything. I share information. It's up to you guys to go do the research. I've done the research, so I feel confident in what I'm saying. And my thing is, I don't believe anything. Either you know it or you don't. And that's where the fasting, the meditation, and the prayer comes in. Because when you ask for knowledge, you have to be ready to receive it. Because once you receive it, doesn't always mean you're going to like what you find. You know what I'm saying? So there is one group of being that was created, and there was a certain phenotype that was created after the fall of Tartary. Okay. And I know I've talked about this multiple times, but for anyone new who subscribed to any of my pages or my channels, you have to understand that what we've been taught is the furthest from the truth, right? We're all living a lie and believing in his story, not our own. And I can tell you specifically because I have done the research. I'm still doing the research, and I hired several people to help me do research on my family. Okay. So I am confident of what I'm telling you, right? For myself, in my family, okay, in my bloodline. Others, not so much. They can't say that, right? I mean, when me and Kamir were talking about, he's like, do you have any idea how many people that I've done trees and they can't get as far back as you've gone? Now, I'm just saying, I've went past the fall of Tartary, which was in the 1700s, okay? 1728 to be exact, 1723 to 1728. The completion of it would have been 1776 when the Reconstruction happened and all 7 countries came to this land. The thing that most people are missing, and like I said, I'm not trying to convince you of anything. Either you do your research and you come to your own understanding and your own knowledge. What I'm telling you is, from my perspective, okay, just from what I've been reading and what I've been studying, it is my understanding based on the maps, based on the books that I've acquired, based on the people that I've talked to, that America is ground zero. Is this right here is the old world. This is the beginning. The Garden of Eden is in Florida. Okay. Ancient Kemet or ancient Egypt, whatever, was here because it was a period of time, as is Tartary was worldwide, right? So when you look at everything, what people miss with the timelines is that everything was here in the US, in the Americas, right? North America, Canada, United States is Central America, and then you've got South America, which will be Mexico and, further south, right? That's what I'm telling you. And we've been taught that it's Central America, but it's not. I'm telling you, they've mixed everything up. They've hid continents. They've hid islands. Let me put it this way: they've hid islands, land masses from the maps. They've hid them. They've got them cloaked. I'm just telling you. And from my understanding and my research, is that everything was here, and what they did, all walks of life, all extraterrestrial, all quote unquote alien beings lived here, and we all lived openly in one another. You had the Atlanteans, you had the Maldekians, you had the Lemurians, and as time went on, everything started spreading out, right? So when you have all these cities or these countries and these different people, they were all here. What they did was, after they fall, they took everything and they pushed it outward to other continents and other land masses. That's why you have a lot of cities here named Cairo, a lot of places here named Memphis. You need to look at the U.S. cities and the names. And I mean, you've got towns that are called Greece. I mean, you've got cities called here in the Americas. I'm telling you, everything was here first and they pushed it out. The part that people are missing is, and it makes a lot of people uncomfortable, when you look and you do your research, you will see that the melanated people were the original people all around the world. I mean, we were here and then we pushed out land masses. And like I said, when I read to you an Alien World Order, there was a time and place where there were different terrestrial factions that lived here, and they were out in the open. They were. Now, when you go through this reset, because there's been 5 resets previously, we're on the 6th one. I always say 7, but it's actually 6. Anywhere between 6 and 7 resets. All right. So we're in number 6. We're the 6th era of the new humanity. And I read that off to you before in several videos, right? So you have the timeline. And the last timeline would have been the fall of Tartary. And that's when this whole Reconstruction came about. And this is where you had the mass migration of the orphan trains, the Cabbage Patch, the new phenotype that was introduced. Now, there's always been light-skinned people here, quote unquote. I don't do the crayon colors. I don't say white because you're not white. All right. You're just a lighter shade of wheat. I mean, literally. We've always had pale-skinned people here among us because they come from 2 albino Negroes. They do. The background, the genome, when you look at it, if you do your research, you'll find that it came from us. We're the original template, melanated people. Not saying that to be hateful. I'm just simply telling you that after the fall, there was a mass, people were unalived everywhere. It was just mass devastation and the planet was flooded again. So you have the introduction to these new foundling hospitals or schools that introduced these orphans, and they shipped them all over the world. They were on every continent. Okay. So when you put the puzzle pieces together, you see what they did. All right. I'm just going to tell you. I mean, and it's up to you to do the research. Now, I talked to someone who said, oh, the reason why we were created is because they wanted somebody smarter and somebody who could, take things to the next level. And I'm like, okay, if you want to call yourself smarter, but then my thing is it's not about hate or being a racist or anything like that. But you got to look at the time since these beings have been alive on this planet. There are a lot of them that are warlike, and they bring chaos, destruction, death, and murder, and they want to consume every single place that they go. So I'm just simply telling you that when you see it for what it is, you start to wake up and you start to unplug, right? So the original people, O positive, O negative, offspring, A positive, A negative, and AB. All right. Then you've got the other different factions or races coming in from hybrid civilizations and the mixture of the new humanity. I'm just telling you. I mean, either you see it or you don't, right? So my point is that when you look at quote unquote the light skin race, for the video, I'm going to say white. When you look at the light skin race and you see that they have O positive, O negative bloodline, those are the people that come from us. They're Negro. Whether they want to accept it or not, or whether they say, oh, I ain't got no black people in my family, quote unquote, black is a crayon color, but you do have melanated people in your family. You just need to do your genealogy. I'm telling you, you got a big mama in your bloodline, whether you know it or not. Not trying to convince you anything. It's either you know it or you don't. And there's no hate, no shame in that. Like I told you, I'm speaking from my experience. I see where we had pale-skinned men come across the freaking continent on a boat, and they were immigrants, and they immigrated to this country, and they married into my family. Where do you think my mother came from? I'm just going to tell you. So there's no shade in that. I'm just simply telling you, some people are not as fortunate enough to get on here and talk about their family. And at some point, like I said, I'm going to pull up my family tree and I'm going to show you. All right. I'm going to show you. I'm going to drop receipts. Okay. For those of you who want to see. All right. It's not going to be a big major thing, but I'm just going to show you. So, my point is, when you get to this point of the orphan trains and the Cabbage Patch Babies, there are people that I have met and talked to that know for a fact that their grandparents or great grandparents, they were orphans. They don't have any documentation on them. And that's fine, because we know that they're what they are. They're Cabbage Patch children. They were groomed. They were raised in these family hospitals, and they either didn't know their parents or, like I said, they were mass created or genetically made in a lab. And that's fine. That's okay. I'm not throwing shade on people who can't pull up the receipts on their family lineage. That's not it. What I'm simply telling you is you need to look at the full picture, and you need to look at what has transpired to get a good idea of what this place is and what they've done, right? Because they're going to do it again. That's my point. They've done it already. We're on a 6 times. Creator of all is not going to let this continue. All right. So I'm just simply saying, when you know, you know. And if you don't have the insight and you don't have the information, some people don't want to find out their family lineage because they're afraid it's going to uncover something like they were adopted or they have a different biological parent. And that's fine. But I'm the type of person, when I'm like a dog with a bone, I'm going to find out. I'm going to keep digging it because I want to know. Just because this is how inquisitive I am. I want to know, and I will find out. So there are a lot of people that they're feeling comfortable speaking on this, and that's why they keep things private, because they don't want things to come out. And I'm just saying, I mean, everybody's different. Not everyone is ready to make their most personal truths or lingering, suspicion public, and that's fine. This chapter belongs to those who choose to share. I feel genuinely honored and privileged to bring you these voices. Their words appear here exactly as I received them, unedited and unpolished, because I wanted to preserve the authenticity of their accounts. Okay. So a picture of some children here, more than likely that were Cabbage Patch or adopted or being sold. I'm just saying, right thinking people and appeal to you. Helpless children appeal to you. Open your doors. Yeah. because they were orphans. Now, some people will theorize that they're from the Tartarian era. They're, from the Tartarians. But a lot of people, and this is my light-skinned brothers and sisters, no slight to you, a lot of you want to insert yourself in history when you weren't even here. And that's the hardest thing when you're dealing with people about this type of subject is everybody wants to talk about Tartary. They want to talk about the civilization that fell, but they're not addressing the elephant in the room. The elephant in the room is that white people weren't even created then. They weren't here on that scale. They weren't. That's why you have the orphan trains and the cabbage patches, because they were raised and conditioned and they were grown in a lab, in an incubator. And then there's nothing wrong with that. I'm just telling you, it's an evil, diabolical thing. And then you've got some quote unquote white people who are actually Negro and they don't know that they're Negro. So I told you based on the blood type. That's what I'm telling you. So you got a lot of people talking about history, but they don't even understand the basic principle of that. The original people of this dome were melanated and the life began here in America and not in Africa. And this is where we have a lot of controversy with so-called quote unquote African Americans. Like I told you, I don't call myself black and I don't call myself African because I know my family lineage. I know because I have receipts on that shit. So I know that I didn't find any documentation where we came over on any damn slave ship or slave boat. And we definitely didn't come from the damn Congo. If anything, they took, and I have books and I can sit up here and read to you all for hours. They took people and rounded them up and put them on ships and took their ass to the Caribbean. They took them to Liberia. They took them to other continents to get them out of here so they can make room for the what, quote unquote, pale skin or white folks coming off the boat. I'm just telling you. I mean, we've always been the majority and there's no hate in that. But the thing that I crack up about so much, and I'm going to get back to this page, what I laugh about so much is that we have so many people running around here, especially these dumb racists that want to say, oh, you guys go back to Africa and this, that, and the other. They don't know the first clue about the true history of this land, especially the so-called ones that they call Nazis. The Nazis were fucking melanated people. I got pictures of that shit. I'm just saying, oh, it's AI, it's created. No, these books were printed in the 16 and 1700s. Okay? I'm just telling you. And they describe clearly who they were and what they look like, especially Hitler. I'm just telling you. So, and then when you do this, the Nazi thing, that was actually our salute. The flag was ours. It just blows my mind because I see what Chief Rebel was talking about, because there are so many people that have been conditioned and groomed to watch TV and believe what they put on TV in movies. And they take that verbatim as truth because it's indoctrination. Again, this is a perversion. Everything we've learned has been flipped upside down in its head. And only the strong-willed people will make a concerted effort to learn the truth. All right? Only a small percentage of people will actually go research shit and look it up and understand and manifest something different in your life. Is because once you learn certain aspects of what's transpired and you start to learn the truth of things, it makes you want to do better because you see how we got to this point. I'm just saying. So you've got a lot of quote unquote white people or pale skin. All right. And I know some people get offended and they say that's racist. It's not racist. Your skin is light, it's pale, and it's still beautiful. All right. I don't hold any kind of ill will against a person who quote unquote calls himself white, other than the fact that you're not a fucking crayon color. That's it. You still have beautiful skin. It's still pretty because I know you came from us. I already know that shit. So ergo, you're a beautiful sentient being as well. All right. You're just a lighter shade. You burn in the sun. That's it. I have family members who are like that. They have to put on sunscreen, blue eyes, green eyes. They have to wear sun. I'm just saying, I understand that. I identify with that and I get it. I totally get that. It doesn't make you any less of a person or any different, right? You just don't understand your origin story. And it's okay. It's just the fact that you have so many of the quote unquote pale skin or white people trying to tell a history that's not theirs. That's it. It's not your history. What's been transpired is what you've been taught based on the indoctrination from these what? Fucking Caucasus Mountain motherfuckers, these Khazars, the gangsters, the mobs, the mafia. They don't give a shit about you whether you pale or not. They damn sure don't give a shit about me because they already know the truth. They know the truth. They were an experiment and they were allowed to just progress. And now you've got this out of control shit that's going on. But the return of the ancient ones and the autochthonous ones, we are coming back into the steed. I'm just telling you, because my whole thing, like I was talking to you guys before, is doing your genealogy, recognizing who you are, what your tribe is, and then moving accordingly. Whether it's reclassification, getting your tribal membership, your tribal enrollment based on your genealogy, what have you. The fact of the matter is, a wrong has been created and has been done, especially by this United States corporation, which was never truly, it was weaponized. They've radicalized the Constitution and they turned it around and created policies in favor of them. Truly, when I tell you that all these people that are over here now are immigrants, and the immigrants are making the policies, because you have to go and look at, hey, when did your ancestors get off the damn boat? Some of y'all can't even pull your damn genealogy because you don't have the background. But you're here now, you're on the soil, but there are quite a few people running around here that don't need to be here that are here, right? Just going to simply tell you. So, and then you've got people running around pretending that there's something that they're not. And see, that makes people uncomfortable when you call that shit out, right? And I don't say it with anger. I do say it with emotion, because when you find out the truth and you find out that we've been lied to about our identity, and we've been reclassified at least 6 times by the U.S. corporation, you got to start to wonder, well, why are my other autochthonous brothers and sisters not waking up? Because they're still listening to liberal ass, wayward ass, dumb ass Negroes and Africans who truly come from another continent over here to do a disservice to our race. That is the reason why we're in the shape that we're in, because we have enemies in the gate, enemies in the bed, enemies telling you who the fuck you are when you should already know, because your ancestors would have told you, like they told me. My ancestors made sure to tell me who they were when they were alive. And I was just a small youngling. I was small, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, getting drilled in my head daily, right? And there was a time where it was very unpopular for them to call themselves Indians, so they assimilated accordingly. That's some weak ass shit, but that's what really happened. They started calling themselves what everybody else called them, which was black and colored. And, you know, colored was a big thing. Colored, black, and then in the 80s, it was African American. So I'm just, and the main person who did this shit, who called people African American, that mother effer was a damn tribal membership, a tribal card owner. He knew he was an American Indian, but he had everybody else calling themselves black and African American just for these Khazars, okay, for these Ashkenazis. Just gonna tell you, freaking blows my mind. All right, let's get into it. So this one says, my grandfather was born on the 5th of August in 1907 as Clifford von Nostrom. His baptismal certificate was dated November of 1907. He was brought to the New York Family Hospital on that day at 3 months old. As with many other children, his mother was single and couldn't afford him. Last year, I paid for and got my grandfather's birth certificate from New York City. It was created for him in 1942 when he needed it for Social Security. In July 1912, as seen on his birth certificate, he was loaded onto a train with other children and rode to Chicago, Illinois. As far as my grandpa said, it was a stopping point where people that had adopted children were picking them up. My grandpa, along with a little girl named Agnes Fitzgerald, were adopted by Alfred and Elsie Prairie from Monmouth, Illinois. They met the train and picked up my grandpa, Clifford, and Agnes. Agnes was 4 at the time and was born in 1908. The Prairies were very quiet people and very kind parents that many wished they had had. They were Catholic folks and farmers at the time when they adopted these 2 children off the orphan train, who were orphan train riders. My grandpa grew up knowing his biological mother's name was Emma von Nostrom. My grandma, his wife, also passed that on to my mother and then to me. We really think that the Prairies had some affiliation with someone pretty important people at New York Family Hospital, as otherwise they would have not have known the birth mother's name. We know nothing of his father. My mother sent off her DNA for testing through Ancestry.com, and I had uploaded it to other sites. I am now working with the search angel to find the correct Emma in New York City, whom was his biological mother, and hopefully we'll find who his father was. Also, my grandfather ended up being a bricklayer, as Alfred Perry had taught him his trade. My aunt that was adopted along with Alfred or Clifford was a hardworking woman as a waitress and met a wonderful man and married him. My grandfather married my grandmother in 1929 and they had 3 children. I say this was the most wonderful outcome they could have hoped for as being orphan trained writers. I will not give up trying to find my grandfather's biological mother and father and hope that it will heal his heart and mind. Okay, and he put the person's name on here. Now, another one was on here where they talked about blood tests. Now, I'm going to skip this one and I'm going to read this one. My father, James Max Ross, was born on May 5th, 1913, named Joseph Max Furlander. Through DNA testing, I discovered that my dad was 100% Jewish. His birth mother was Fanny Furlan, and she was 16 years old at the time of his birth. We determined that she came across the ocean on a boat along with her mom and father and brother Willie. She was an Ashkenaz Jew, so we determined that she most likely lived in northern Russia with her parents. Now, I'm not here to spread any discord or any kind of ascension or anything like that. I'm just going to simply tell you that the people who are now in that religion are converts, okay? And like I said, she's telling you her lineage and she knows that she's from Russia, all right? She's Ashkenaz. I'm just telling you that the history is so much more complex than what you would ever even imagine. Like I told you, the things that we've been taught are not correct. They're implied, and people have just adopted what they've heard on TV without doing any research. And the thing about it is, and I know some people will be uncomfortable, and I say this, Hitler wasn't wrong in what he said in his speech. Okay. I have his book. I have 2 books over here, and I actually have listened to his speech and I could understand why he said the things that he said, but he's been villainized. And I'm going to just tell you that he has been. Now, if you have some Jewish people in your family and you're feeling some type of way, all right, I understand that. But for those of you who have the ears to hear and the eyes to see things, you really need to do your research and understand what actually transpired. There's a version of history that was spoon-fed to us. That's not the true history. That's all I'm going to say. All right. And like I said, you've got these people who are a new made-up term that they wrote themselves into history, and they fabricated this whole ordeal to put themselves above everyone else and take the inventions that were created by said people that were here previously, melanated people, and assume their identities. Now, I don't care how you feel. I've done the research and I know what I'm talking about. So my thing is we won't ever right this wrong, or we won't ever be able to step into or walk into our truth until you accept certain things. And until you go do your research and you do your family genealogy, and then you look at the laws that are on the books, and you go back and you look at what transpired during history. Jamil Shamshi Dean does an excellent job putting this information together, as does Mike Lane. There are other people, Kamira Awa. There are Chief Red Wolf, James Lucifer Wooten Branch. Excellent, gives you excellent content and shows you where you need to go look at, and you do the research yourself so that you can be comfortable in knowing the truth. It's not enough for me to just make these videos and tell you bits and pieces of information I find interesting. I'm telling you, you need to do the legwork for yourself. Okay. That's all I'm saying. All right. And there's no slight. I'm not throwing shade on anyone, but the people who call themselves Jews are Ashkenazis. They are not the chosen people. Okay. They're just not. The true people are Judean, the Judean, Judean. All right. And until you study the history, you won't ever know this stuff. All right. You're just going to buy into what everybody else is going along. And I'm the farthest from the thing. I don't go along with what people say. I've always been a person by myself, and I've always done my own thing. And I'm going to continue to be that way. All right. So she says she knows that her family lineage is Ashkenazi Jew. Okay. That means his dad's father would have been Jewish also, but never found out anything about him. During my research, we found out he was born on May the 5th, 1913 at Beth Israel Hospital in New York City. 13 days after he was born, his mother turned him over to the New York Foundling Hospital, saying she could not take care of him. We don't have information on what his life was like for 3 years, but his adoptive parents, James and Myrtle Ross, had girls and wanted a boy to continue the family name. They wrote to the Foundling Hospital requesting a healthy boy, okay, and he was identified with number 32. I don't know how many states and towns he stopped in before reaching Grand Rapids in Minnesota. When he arrived, he was cleaned up and stood on the flatbed trailer of his train. Thus came the term up for adoption, but he had the number pinned on his clothing, so it was known that he was already spoken for. Dad told us that he recalled a nurse came home with his family who had been on the train for a period of time. Okay. His parents were led to believe that he came from Belgium per the country's comment instead of Northern Russia. Okay. I believe at the time it would have been difficult to swallow adopting a Jewish child, and he lived with them for several years and then they decided to adopt him to make him an official part of the family when he was 9 years old. I could go on more about his life, but this is a summary of his birth and the orphan train ride he took with some of the circumstances behind that event. I wish I had so much more than I do about his birth and his few years in New York City, but I stopped searching. Perhaps I will start back up again. Here's the orphan train. Look. Now, there were some melanated children on the train. I'm not going to sit up here and say, oh, it was only just pale skin or quote unquote light skinned people, white people. I don't use that word, but it wasn't only just the light skinned people on the train. There were some melanated babies on there too, but albeit there were more quote unquote white babies than there were melanated. All right. I'm just going to tell you, you've got the Reconstruction era, and like I said, the Cabbage Patch and the incubators, they were picked. These children were picked. And I mean, I'm not like in light of the situation with, some of the people in their lives, because obviously there are good people in every race, in every part of the world. I'm not saying that. I'm just simply telling you that this is the part where people don't want to talk about the fact that they do have orphans in their families. They were orphans themselves, and they don't want to bring attention to that. Why? Because, I don't know, it could be because they're ashamed, or they just put that behind them and they put that in the past and they don't want to harbor on it, right? Because if they continue to harbor on it, how can they move forward with their lives and live a productive life, right? So he's got more stories in here of people getting off the train and what they went through. There was one story in here that talked about children being trafficked. I mean, they're still doing that right now. So this last part, it says the children of industrial revolution, right? As I sit here contemplating my contribution to this chapter, I ponder the subject matter, knowing it could take us in many different directions. The narrative has a way of distracting and leading us astray, even for those who are quote unquote awake. So I take a deep breath and clear my mind, waiting for the guidance and clarity needed to begin. Okay. Stick to the facts. I tell myself, present this in a way that allows the reader to come to their own conclusions, perhaps even igniting an inquisitive curiosity to conduct their own research. Okay. If they feel compelled to share their findings with like-minded individuals, the ripple effect may lead to an expanded awareness and new conversations. Sounds good? Well, here we go. History tells us that from the early 17th century to the 19th century, countless events took place that would shape the way we live today. My research led me to the Birmingham led me to Birmingham in England, where 3 golden statues stand to this day, depicting 3 men surveying plans for the future of humanity. Matthew Bolton, William Murdoch, and James Waite. These statues immortalize them as mild deities, lording over their domain, the key figures of the Britain's Industrial Revolution. They were the entrepreneurs, the inventors, the engineers, manufacturers, financiers, scientists, and philanthropists of their time. Secret societies and brotherhoods worked alongside them. The age of technology had arrived, and with it, an abundant and crucial resource was exploited children. Children would colonize the new frontiers. Children would work the new industries and the technology. Children would labor on farms and in fields. Children would toil in the mines and factories. This is true. I've seen countless pictures of that. The labor of children was an integral part to raise of the new industrial age. Okay. The rise of the new industrial age. Without them, the Industrial Revolution and the broader colonization efforts, or reset, quote unquote, the reset, may not have succeeded as brilliantly as it had. Well, they had to be able to create these children in these factories and these incubators. And then when they got to a certain age, of course, they would put them on the trains and they would ship them out. And, you know, as you can see in other books that I've read, I've deep dived into other things like Claudio's work. I think I've even shared David Icke's stuff over here too as well. The point is, when you see how they mastermind this plan, it's actually quite brilliant how they repopulated the planet. And they repopulated it with, quote unquote, a new phenotype, which is my light-skinned brothers and sisters. Not all of you guys come from incubators or orphan trains, or not all of you have descendants like that. Like I said, a lot of you do have melanated people in your family and you're just not even aware of it. You're not even aware that your great-great-grandmother 6 generations or 7 generations back was melanated. You know, like I told you, it only takes, like Chief said, it's only 1 war and 3 generations of people to erase who you are. I mean, you know, I could pretty much look at someone and tell if they've got that autochthonous in them. They could be pale skin, blue eyes, blonde hair, but I can tell. I've always had that eye because I have so many of those people in my family. I can look at you and tell you if you're passing or if you're not. And I mean, there's no shade to that. People just don't want to have these conversations because it's uncomfortable to them. You know, I mean, what would be the worst thing finding out that you had some Negro DNA in you? You know, maybe that's why you like seasoning so much. I'm just saying, maybe that's why you like to dress a certain way, or you eat certain food, or you act a certain way, or your attention, you're drawn to someone who is of a darker hue than you. I'm just simply telling you, it's in your DNA, and you just refuse to see it for what it is. But I digress. I'm not here to try to convince you anything. I find it fucking fascinating. So I talk about it. So, here's the thing. The pauper children of England were targeted by military authorities, locked up, sentenced, and transported to new colonies. England had been trafficking human cargo for centuries for political and economic gain. A trade Queen Victoria officially ended in 1838, okay? Yet, in reality, the trade never stopped. It was merely rebranded. The rise of free labor, Britain's overcrowding crisis. In 1834, the official narrative tells us that Britain was overcrowded with soldiers returning from wars overseas. Farming communities were forced to migrate to urban areas in search of work, as emerging technologies were destroying both the agricultural and handmade craft industries. As a result, crime rates skyrocketed and prisons became severely overcrowded. To address this, the government repurposed military ships docked on the river Thames, Thames, which is named after who? Anybody want to take a guess? King James. That wasn't his name. His name was not James. It was Thames, Thames. That was who had commissioned to have the King James Version Bible put together. All right. It was King Thames, Thames. That's his name. All right. And he was melanated and he was homosexual. I mean, I see pictures of him being a pale skin all day long. I'm like, that ain't him. And if he saw that shit, he'd be rolling over his grave laughing right now. I'm just gonna tell you. I'm telling you, they whitewashed everything. I think it's fascinating the way they did it. They did a brilliant job of hoodwinking a lot of people. But I ain't fooled my ass. I've been doing that shit since I was a kid. Something wasn't right. Just gonna tell you. Anyway, so it says what they did was they took these ships that were docked on the River Thames as temporary prisons, but in then quickly reached capacity. The prisoners, including men and women and children as young as 6 years old, under the harsh legal system of the time, children were sentenced as adults, meaning they could face execution or hard labor. Oh yeah, they was doing some shit back in the day. During this period, a new law was introduced that would mark a turning point in English history, the Poor Law and the Bastardly Extension Clause Act. All right, where's my marker? Oh, please, let's full stop. Let's mark this because I'm going to do some research on that. The Poor Law and the Bastardly Extension Clause. The legislation fundamentally changed how politicians viewed poverty and charity, dictating who was deemed deserving of assistance and who should provide it. The Bastardly Act was particularly cruel. It labeled all unwed mothers as part of the undeserving poor, stripping them of any right to social support. Charity was no longer about aid. It became synonymous with forced labor. The so-called solutions to poverty were workhouses, factories, jails, or mines, domestic servitude, convict transportation, and indentured servitude. And this is why I'm telling you, when I pulled my genealogy, I saw quite a few pale skins in my family that came over here that were declared, they declared what they had on them, and I saw their work papers. I'm just telling you. So, I mean, you got the Indian side and you got the side that came in from Britain. Just gonna say it. The new social order was built on a narrative of poverty, immoral women, and unwanted children. The workforce of free labor had officially arrived. See how this all works. Implement an act that affects hundreds of thousands of impoverished people at a carefully orchestrated moment, ensuring that the maximum outcome, all right, what foresight to instigate such an operation, one that may have been planned early as the 16th century, if not earlier. Oh yeah, they did. They knew they were going to flip this bad boy and they were going to unalive millions and millionaire people. And they did that. They did it. You could walk through the catacombs and see bones of people, just their bones. You could see tunnels made of human remains. I mean, you can go online and look it up. I mean, I'm just telling you. And the Vatican, really, they've really got tons of human remains in the Vatican. That's why they have that power there. And that's why it's on guard, because they have the technology there to change where we are right now. I'm just telling you. So let's dive into the seemingly deliberate removal of Britain's most wanted and most vulnerable, shall we? Britain's population boom, a curious mechanism. In the second half of the 18th century, now remember, the Reconstruction was 1776, right? Britain experienced massive population growth. The official narrative provides many explanations for this surge, but one statement stands out: the huge improvement in fertility being the mechanism of population growth. Those key words, huge improvement in fertility, are particularly interesting, and I'll return to them shortly. In about 1788, when our story begins, the population of Britain Empire was recorded as 7.5 million people in England, 1.6 million in Scotland, and 0.3 million in Wales. By 1851, the numbers have been doubled: 16.7 million in England, 2.9 million in Scotland, and 1.2 in Wales. London alone had close to 1 million residents in 1788. However, these figures might not have been entirely accurate. A comprehensive census wasn't introduced until 1801, and civil registration of births, deaths, and marriage only began in 1837. Before this, local parishes were responsible for keeping records, an unreliable system at best, with many records lost over time. So the actual population figures may have been even higher. Given the sheer scale of the population explosion, It's no wonder Oliver Twist by Charles Dickens feels more like a historical document than a work of fiction. What exactly was the mechanism that supposedly led to such a massive rise in fertility during a time of extreme poverty? Typically, economic hardship leads to lower birth rates and food shortages, disease, and overall instability. Yet during this era, Britain was not only sustaining its own population, but also supplying settlers to multiple new colonies, i.e., over here in America. Could the ruling elite have already been implementing cloning? Yeah, they've been cloning people for years. Or was there another system in place designed to increase the production of babies for future plans? Now, let's cross the seas to a large island, one that had seemingly been waiting for colonization. For some time, it said untouched by Captain Cook, reported back to London, urging the British government to claim it before the French or any other power could beat them to it. And just like that, Australia was suddenly available, ready to receive Britain's overflowing criminal population and a fresh wave of migrants eager for a new frontier. In 1788, the first fleet arrived in Botany Bay, Sydney, Australia, after a grueling 12-month voyage. Among the ships were 6 convict transports carrying men, women, and children, the youngest being just 9 years old. Many perished during the treacherous journey, while others were born amidst the chaos. Children faced the same harsh conditions and brutal sentences as adults. In one tragic case, a 9-year-old convict girl was sentenced to hang, but was later granted a reprieve only to be transported to Australia instead. The fleet carried young adults, girls of childbearing age, and even babies, who were taken with their mothers but quickly separated upon arrival. It's unimaginable how terrified and alone these children must have felt, ripped from everything familiar, enduring unthinkable hardships before even reaching Australia. And once they did, their suffering was only worsened. If you don't know where you come from, then you don't know if you don't know, let me read this again. If you don't know where you come from, then you don't know where you are. If you don't know where you are, then you don't know where you're going. And if you don't know where you are going, then you're probably going wrong. And that's by Terry Pratchett. And it says, was this deliberate? I think it was. I do. Okay. Were these children being conditioned by a system designed to erase their past, ensuring that future generations will forget and even question the truth? These young, traumatized minds were ripe from indoctrination, easily molded into believing a manufactured narrative. That's what I'm telling you. A lot of people will fight against what I'm saying because they just can't comprehend it. Like their minds can't even stretch that. They can't even fathom that. And the first thing a person will say, well, where's your truth? And then they're going to get all emotional and get in their feelings. But I'm just telling you, I mean, if you want to learn the truth, you can find it out for yourself. You spend the money, take trips, go to the museums, book sessions, and go behind the closed doors where they keep the books. And you can pull out the books. You can see the original people of the land who are my complexion, if not darker. Just going to tell you. So it says, was this deliberate? Were these children being conditioned by a system designed to erase their past, ensuring their future generations would forget and never question the truth? Yeah. These young, traumatized minds were ripe for indoctrination, easily molded into believing a manufactured narrative, one that would be passed down as truth for generations. And this is how we got here. With time, schools, religion, and entire societies would be rewritten to align with the new reality. Okay. The way of life would change dramatically, and new tools of manipulation and control would be introduced without consent, i.e. TV and music and film. Okay. Upon reaching Sydney, convicts were sent to a temporary island prison known to the indigenous locals as Mat Wan Yi. The British, however, renamed it to Fort Denison. Of course they did. This isolated island served as a harsh punishment site where convicts were marooned for long periods, surviving only with bread and water. From the very beginning of Australia's penal colony, the infrastructure was already in place, a well-prepared system of control. Over time, more than 200 convict establishments were built, ensuring that the cycle of suffering and submission would continue. Hang on a minute. So there were ready-made prisons and other establishments in Australia as early as 1788. Yeah, they were, because they recycled the buildings from the previous civilization, which was the Tartarians. Tartar, black Tartar babies, Tartarians. Just telling you. And why does Fort Denison look like a star fort with a structure resembling an old castle? Well, that's because it was. Who built this so-called temporary prison that looks anything but temporary? When was it actually constructed? And how did so many of these facilities suddenly exist in such a short time? I read to you what they did in Utah. How millions of melanated people all around this country were unalived. They just walked right in and assumed their homes. They took over these buildings and they repurposed the grander buildings into courthouses, government buildings, universities, and some of them they even actually kept to live in for themselves. Very few of them did, but they did. Okay. Where did the construction materials come from? After all, this wasn't the whole point of transporting convicts to Australia to provide labor, to build the grand old world architecture, roads, and infrastructure found throughout the country. They assumed and they took over what was already built and they used it. It's called usury. It's really what it is. The only thing they've done is commit usury and fraud and chaos. And they've kept everyone in a state of fear, panic, reaction, and provide a damn solution for all the bullshit. Okay. So yet another island, Norfolk Island, was also mysteriously ready to go. It was founded by General King, who in 1801 also established an orphan school for destitute young girls in Sydney. How convenient, right? A convenient setup. If all seems a little too convenient, don't you think? What if Australia, Tasmania, New Zealand, Canada, and the Americas had already been reset? What if these populations have been removed by plagues, wars, mud floods, fires, advanced weaponry, destruction, direct energy weapons, they quote unquote call them comets and all kinds of shit, weather catastrophes, all these people were unalived. I'm telling you, now when you look at the buildings all around the world, these buildings would collapse so fast. They wouldn't withstand the buildings that were built millennia, 250 years ago. Those buildings were built by true mechanical ingenuity. I'm telling you, the stone that they used, the tons of stone that they harnessed, they used these buildings with sound resonance technology. We can't even reconstruct that shit now today. I think the latest construction would be Coral Castle in Florida, if you look that up. And mysteriously how that was built. The little man that was like 5'4", not even 120 pounds wet, built that bad boy by himself. Just going to tell you, truth is stranger than fiction. So, with these lands cleaned up and repurposed, waiting for the new wave of traumatized children and adults to arrive, people with no memory of who they were or where they came from, could this have been a part of a reset timeline affecting different regions at different times? If you look at the map, I'd say he's pretty right. He's spot on it. Going unnoticed by the broader population, a way to repopulate the world with unsuspecting humans until a future event occurs on a global scale that wakes part of the population up, which is what's happening right now. And I'm going to tell you, the majority of people that are waking up are my light-skinned brothers and sisters. So many of my melanated brothers and sisters, they ain't got a clue. I'm telling you. I'll tell you, my light-skinned brothers and sisters, y'all far ahead of the game. Because y'all research, some shit's going on. And quite a few of y'all have blood O in you. So I'm just going to tell you. So really, you just a lighter shade version of a Negro. I know how that sounds, but I mean, if you know. I think it's fucking fabulous. It don't matter what color you are. The point is they fucked over us all. That's what I'm telling you. They fucked over us all. They got everybody running around here don't know what the hell's going on, believing bullshit, and will refuse to turn the news off and stop watching TV and stop listening to these wayward ass fucktards. Stop brushing your teeth with tap water. Stop using fluoride toothpaste. Stop cooking your food in tap water. Stop using aluminum deodorant. Stop using chemical-based shit in your hair. Like, look. This I put in my hair, but guess what? I'm taking this out as of in the morning. It's gone. I'm going to go back to my short stuff for a little bit. But my point is change the way you think and change the way you move, right? Eat real food. Eat shit that's grown from the earth that's organic. Stop eating this GMO shit. I'm just telling you. It plays a factor in your enlightenment journey. That's just the simple things you could do. By all means, stop using the chemically laced toilet paper. Get you some bamboo toilet paper. Get you some bamboo panties and underwear, people. Bamboo underwear. I think a 7-pack is like $100, but I'm just telling you, you got to start somewhere. I'm not saying I'm preaching to the choir. I'm just giving you little bits of knowledge of nuggets of knowledge and a little bit of information. Some of you already know this stuff. Y'all can repeat this back to me backwards and forwards, upside down and reverse. Y'all already know. Some of y'all know because y'all waking up. You know what's up. You do. But, we sometimes have to be quiet and stay in our lane because we'll be considered the black sheep of the family or the one who likes to start stuff or one who's combative or just doesn't fall in line. No, fuck no. I ain't never going to fall in line. I ain't never been the one to fall in line. I'm going to tell you. So let's finish this last page up and we're done because I'm almost in an hour. And I appreciate you guys taking the time out to listen to me read. All right, so were these lands cleaned up and repurposed? Yeah, they were. Waiting for a new wave of traumatized children and adults to arrive. People with no memory of who they were or where they came from. Could this have been part of a reset timeline affecting different regions at the different times, going unnoticed by the broader population, a way to repopulate the world with unsuspecting humans until a future event occurs on a global scale that wakes part of the population up? If you look at all the continents all around the world in different countries and you start to look at the world wars and who was in charge then and how each major city all around the world, even here in the Americas, caught on fire. They burnt down stuff. They had people coming in and colonizing places and wars and stuff like that, killing the original people, unaliving the original people. You'll see it. If you just put it in a map and you start just writing stuff down and taking a stick pen or a push pin, different colors, get a world map and start laying that shit in, you'll see it. It really is like that. When you start to look at the wave of the destruction on every single continent and what they did, it was brilliantly thought out. I had to give these motherfuckers a hand clap. I have to. They did a magnificent job, but they didn't do it by themselves though. So I'm telling you, they had non-human entities helping them. It was brilliant. It was absolutely brilliant what they did. I'm just telling you, absolutely brilliant. I mean, they couldn't have pulled it off no other way. They couldn't have pulled it off no other way. So it says, let's dig deeper. There were very few records from the early colonization period. Yep. In fact, an official census wasn't introduced in Australia until 1860. And I think over here was 1835. I think I'm right. 1830, 1835 or something like that. And our people, I'm going to tell you, our people here, they didn't believe in that shit. Because when you got the colonizers that came over into the 5 civilized tribes, there was over 500 indigenous tribes here of melanated people. We didn't trust them like that. We didn't trust them pale skins coming over here. I'm just going to tell you. And I mean, if you look at it, you understand why. But the thing that they don't tell you, and I'm going to read, at some point, I got like 5 books over here. The white and servitude and indentured service and the white slavery that happened. Because what they're not telling you is a lot of them, even though they're prisoners, they would come over on ships and stuff like that. They were set up for indentured servitude. They were. And what they're not telling you is that a lot of so-called Indian, quote unquote, melanated, quote unquote, black, quote unquote, colored people bought white slaves when they came over here. All right. And there was an uprising all over the world. So you got to understand, people were just trying to live and survive. Now, there were some pale skins that came over here that were not indentured servants, and they married into the family. Like I showed you, well, I will show you my genealogy, but that's what happened with my family. But I'm simply telling you that when the wars started to come and they started to clean house and round up all of the American Indians and Negroes that were here, quote unquote, rebranded as Negroes, you had some pale skin or white people that were here that fought alongside us. And from what I'm reading, they were hung first. They killed them, their own kind. These other white people came over here and killed these white people because they fought with the American Indians. They fought with us. And they couldn't have that. They wanted to know what side they were on. They chose the side and they unalived their ass. See, they're not telling you that shit. Okay, they're just not telling you that. That's not something that's known in history and throughout school. They're not going to say, well, we hung our own kind because they decided to empathize with the American Negro, with the Indians. So we killed their ass. They're not going to tell you that shit. They're going to make it seem like they brought us over here on a damn slave ship. They're gonna make it seem like they've been doing all this time, right? I'm just telling you. But they're not telling you the full story. And then until you start to read and research, you won't ever know that shit. I'm just going to tell you. No shade, no shade, no shade. I'm just saying. They unalived a lot of light-skinned, quote unquote, white people that stood with autochthonous people, which stood with the melanated Indians, the melanated Negroes, okay, the original people of this land. They unalived their ass. And then of course we went to battle and started fighting everything. But the thing about it is, like, when we did that shit, we would go in and we would mop up entire towns. And they don't tell you that shit. You kill a couple of people of us, then we're going to come in and we're going to unalive all you guys. But they don't tell you that. They make it seem like it's something completely different than what it actually is. They took the playbook from us, and then they've turned it around and created these monstrosities of the Mossad and CIA fuckery you got going on over here on the soil. That shit ain't going to end well with these people. There's just not. And then they've been doing that shit over there in Palestine for a long time. But let their ass start coming over here and unaliving us. They're going to have an uprising on their hands that they will never be able to walk it back. They would have to hit the switch and flip all this shit. I'm just telling you. Because now in this time frame, there's a lot of young autochthonists that know the truth and they're coming to their awareness and they're fasting, they're meditating, they're praying. And there are some who have been trained by military that are secretly quiet, sitting back and just watching and waiting until they get the call. I'm just telling you, until they see the signs, and then all hell is going to break loose. I don't advocate violence, but sometimes the only result of the only end game is violence. You can't pray your way through the shit that we're about to go through. You just can't. You're going to either have to get on board and know where your place is and know who you are and stand firm in your existence, or be cannon fodder. Just going to tell you. This last part here, it says, in fact, an official census wasn't introduced in Australia until 1860. I think here in the Americas was like 1830s. Okay. And then in 1881, the census, along with many other historical documents, were conveniently destroyed in the Sydney Crystal Palace fire in 1882. Anytime they did the census records, all over whatever continent they were on, there were fires. They burned the records mysteriously. All right. That's what they say. It was lost in the fire. Explorers' descriptions of Australia, both before and after Cook, artifacts discovered, and Aboriginal art and cultural records. Another coincidence? I don't believe in those anymore. They actually tried to get rid of the truth, but there's so much proof out there, there's no way they can cover it up anymore. It's just not. Okay. So it says, the hidden truth behind women factories. Adoption wasn't legally recognized until 1926, meaning that before then, nothing was properly recorded. Okay. So they say. The entire system was rife with corruption, involving not only governing authorities, but also unscrupulous monsters. But that's a whole other story. As you know, Australia saw many ships arrive between 1788 and the 19th century. These ships carried convict children, children of convicts, childbearing girls, and young mothers sent by the thousands. Okay. Women housed in women's factories and women's farms, where they were forced into hard labor, domestic servitude, and factory work. One of Australia's largest women's factories was in Von Diemen's Land, or Tasmania. Why call them factories? Why not call them what they really were? They were prisons for women. In 1801, Surveyor General John Oxley stated, and I quote, "What the new colony needed was a well-regulated factory to teach women habits of industry so that they would become useful to society rather than burdens upon it." Whoa. You can almost hear the aristocratic arrogance and superiority dripping from that statement. But there's a deeper hidden truth, or truth hidden between the lines. A well-regulated factory, okay, for what exactly, or who, of course? Could it have been anything to do with a huge improvement in fertility as a mechanism for the population growth? Yeah. Were these women factories actually breeding farms? Maybe even a cover for an experimental facility for the up and coming world fairs where incubator babies will be exhibited. The exhibits will have signs boasting that a premature baby can be watched advance in growth and in specially designed growing facilities. Yeah, I have pictures of that and I showed you guys that. They had incubator farms. Okay, they did. They had them underground. They had them beyond the ice walls and they brought them here and they set them up all around in every major city they had them. All right. That prompted me to dig deeper, so I searched into the incubator babies in Australia. I couldn't believe what I found. Australia in 1894 and 1895 at the Fremantle Industrial Exhibition, incubator babies were displayed for public viewing. Let's break this down. The expositions opened in November 1894 and ran from April 1885. Newspapers reported that once the exhibition ended, the babies were hidden from public view. Why were they hidden? Where did these babies come from and where do they go? How did they even get to Western Australia in 1894? Were they transported from Coney Island? Were they from Australia, Western Australia maybe? My mind was overrun with questions. None of it made sense. Why parade these premature babies in incubators for 6 months, showcasing advanced technology only to hide them away once the event was over? That don't make no sense. Where are the mamas at? If you got babies in these incubators, then you're growing children. It's what you're doing. And they're putting it in plain sight. All right. Just going to tell you. So, were these babies part of the industrial experiment? I believe so. This became part of which is much larger tradition, a disturbing blend of medical advancement and sideshow spectacle, similar to the Globe Dime Museum in 1886. The children in these incubators were even subjected to a dog attack, leading to them receiving Pasteur's experimental rabies vaccine. The public was then being desensitized one step at a time. The eugenics movement and modern pod babies, okay? This wasn't just about medical advancement. It was also the shaping of public perception, the eugenics movement, and was gaining momentum. And people were being conditioned to accept babies in an unnatural environment, and it's still happening today. Y'all know about the eugenics movement and Margaret Singer and that diabolical bitch. Y'all already know about her, or some of you do. I would highly suggest you read up on her and go buy the book about her. I'm just telling you. It says, just look at the pod babies, these artificial wombs marketed as the future of childbirth and are being heavily promoted by celebrities, social media influencers, billionaires, philanthropists, and eugenicists. It's always a philanthropist in the mix somewhere. Fucking Bill Gates. The same power-hungry parasites who ruled over us in the past are still in control today. They've just changed their titles and their meat suits. Yep, and that's that. So, he has this conclusion here, and we're done with the book. All right. So, it's just a page and a half, so I'm going to read this. It's actually 3 pages. And then we're on here in an hour, so if you have to pause or come back, please, by all means, try to finish the video when you can. I'm just going to go ahead and read this conclusion, and we're done with this. We're done with his books. All right. It says, we've covered a hell of a lot here, haven't we? From the unsettling possibility that humanity's origins could be engineered experiment by the Anunnaki or the Elohim, a certain set of humans, yes, to Clonaid offering human cloning on a service today. If you follow the Tartaria conspiracy, you'll probably agree with my theory that the Cabbage Patch Babies were part of some grotesque mass repopulation scheme, possibly involving cloning. Think about it. The flood of these babies across the globe, combined with the World's Fairs and Martin Concy's bizarre incubator babies, it all just adds to fuel to the fire. And it all unfolded right around the same time as the rise of the baby farms and orphanages. Coincidence? No, he doesn't think so, and I don't either. Let's talk about Alice Gay Blanchie for a moment. Watch her films, and you will feel the same chill I did. The way she handles babies is nothing short of disturbing. Even after seeing it a dozen times, it still leaves me with a sense of dread. It's as if she'd never seen a baby before, or worse, never touched one. It's unsettling to say the least. Yeah, she picks the babies up by their arms and kind of just dangles them up. And I mean, yeah, she does. You got to watch the film. It's on YouTube. It's a silent film, but just watch it. So it says, now remember Dolly the sheep. She's probably forgotten to most people, a mere blip in history. But why? Just like how we no longer hear about dinosaur discoveries, despite finding remains all the time when I was younger. Funny, isn't it? Maybe these fossils weren't from dinosaurs at all. What if they were from something else? They were dragons. And they still exist. What if they were from something else, something ancient, something mythological? No, they're not mythological. They were actually real flesh and blood beings, as is griffins are real. Okay. Maybe the parasites were working hard to bury the truth, so they created a narrative to cover it all up and locked it away with the Smithsonian Institute and the Vatican's vaults, along with other inconvenient truths. Yeah, they did. But Dolly, she wasn't just a clone. She reproduced. That obliterates the myth that clones cannot have offspring. As for the argument that clones don't have souls, how could we possibly know? We're just too far down the food chain to even begin to understand what is really going on. Then there's the obsession with the bloodlines and the blood types. Another rabbit hole that leads straight to a sinister reality. The parasites are obsessed with keeping their bloodlines pure to maintain their grip on power, control, and wealth. It's led to some horrific outcomes, and now, with the growing push to know our blood types and trace our origins, it should be raising alarms. Why the sudden interest in who we are, where we come from, and what blood runs through our veins? When's the last time they did anything out of a genuine compassion for us? The truth. What they're really after we won't be shared willingly ever. They won't ever tell us the truth. Could the reason we keep seeing Cabbage Patch Babies and orphan plastered across films and postcards be karmic retribution? A confession hidden in plain sight? Or they are so desperate to escape divine punishment that they think revealing the truth in this twisted way will somehow absolve them of the bullshit? He didn't put that bullshit in there, but I just said it. I hope not. I'm certain they've used films and science fiction as well as weapons to brainwash the masses, making them dismiss everything while they continue pulling the strings from the shadows. It's a game, and we've all been played. I agree. People like Donald Marshall, which is the gentleman that I read to you, I think the half of chapter 1 on the reptilians, okay? Donald Marshall, Kid Bowie, and Kevin Hart have spilled the beans on Hollywood's dark underbelly, but but now they are speaking out of their own volition. Who are they? Just puppets. The perfect stooges designed to deliver the message to the public. Yeah. One day, perhaps, we'll learn the truth of our creation. But until then, I lean more toward the chilling possibility that Homo sapiens were cloned rather than evolved. Why? Because Darwin was funded by both royal and scientific societies who had an agenda. The Vatican allegedly bankrolled him too. Though there were wealthy benefactors, there are whispers that the Jesuits fed him ideas, subtly steering scientific discourse. Better to control the narrative of evolution than it forced on them. After all, who wants the truth of a divine creation showed in their face? Since diving into cloning research in the Great Reset of 1776, I can't help but feel that studying our genealogy is a waste of time. Any information beyond the 1800s is probably a lie. I disagree. I disagree with that. They offer the trace of our bloodlines with DNA testing is probably just another clever scheme with sinister intentions. For centuries, great minds have been obsessed with creating life, like John Dee's experiments with the homunculus, homunculus, are proof that these twisted science was least possible, if not reality entirely real. But why? Why are they real? What are they really after? Okay. In the end game, to replace us, to use the DNA of certain individuals to repopulate the world with a new controllable human race? They've been doing that for a long time. Are they seeking out those who will blindly obey and those with genetics that they can manipulate? In my own opinion, we are created by a superior race, possibly the Anunnaki and the Elohim. Yeah. And since then, many have tried to do good, to inspire, and to help. Some invent and some save lives, and some live long, disease-free lives. Some can even be direct descendants of the first rulers, maybe even figures like Yeshua. The parasites are undoubtedly obsessed with these people and not in any positive way. Will we ever get to know the truth about our creation and who our creators really were? I'm not sure. But I know that there are people out there that know the truth and people out there that are trying to do it again. Okay. For now, all I have to do is keep digging and ask you to do the same. I would like to thank everyone who contributed to my research, especially those who shared their personal stories with me and now with you. And thank you for reading this book, for supporting my work, and for keeping your eyes open, because the truth is out there, buried underneath layers of lies, ready to be uncovered. And that's the end of the book. And he's got, I didn't read all the contributor stories in here, but he actually has definitions in terms like the Illuminati, John Dee, Freemasonry, George Orwell, the Golem, Higgs boson particle, the Hermetic Order, Gucci Mane, the Knights Templar, the Maritime Law, Joseph Mengele, MK Ultra, the Moors, Mary Shelley. It says the Moors were Muslim peoples primarily from North America who invaded and settled in parts of Europe during the Middle Ages, notably the Iberian Peninsula. Okay. Like I told you, he's got this because of what history has taught. But if you look at the alternative histories, you'll understand that everyone started here in the Americas and they pushed them way out. They pushed themselves out and they started calling each other by different names based on the village or the city that you lived in here in America. I'm just going to tell you. So everything starts here and it pushes out. That's what I'm telling you. That's what I've seen. That's what I've come to understand. A lot of people will not agree with that, and that's fine. But when you look at this, you're going to look at the Moors, and they were typically Sephardic Jews. All right. So it says, and then they say that they're Sephardic Jews, and then in other discourse, like he says, they're Muslim peoples. So you have the differences there in the different religions, right? But Moor also means the great seafarer, and it also means melanated people that are dark skinned or pigmentation. I'm just going to tell you. So there's a lot of different conflicts about who is Moorish and what is that. Like Chief said, you need to look up the word myrrh, and you need to look at the word myrrh, and you need to look at the word Moor, and you need to see the differences between the two. I'm just going to tell you. So, and he talks about the Mormons, orphan train movement, the poetic Edie. He has the king and queens who are of royal nobility. They were dark skinned, dark melanated nobles all around the world who sit on the throne. And everything is ran by these indigenous people, even still to this day. You'll see the light skin or white people that are pushed out in front as political key figures, but the unseen hand, best believe, is melanated. Don't care how you feel. I mean, if you read as much as I do and you study much as I do, you would know the same damn thing. I'm just going to say it. So anyway, I hope you guys have an amazing day. These are his 3 books. Okay. Testing the Cabbage Patch Kids, The Rise of the Clones The Cabbage Patch Babies. And then this one here is Conspiracy Theorists from Agatha to Zombies. That's the latest one. And I've read to you guys a couple of stories out of here. We may cover a couple of more. I'm not going to read the entire book, but I highly recommend all 3 of his works. And I appreciate you guys hanging out with me today. I went over an hour, almost an hour and a half. So I'm going to jump off of here. And hopefully I will be back in the next couple of days to read to you guys again. I am going to get back into the Book of Wisdom and Ascension. We're going to talk about the lost teachings of Atlantis. And then I also want to piggyback off of Tesla and the Cabbage Patch Kids to go to the reptilians. Okay. So anyway, I'll talk to you guys soon. And you guys remember what I always say, you be the change you want to see all around this Earth Dome, because it's up to you and I to make a positive change. Bye.